Please leave a comment where you are watching in the world. Please submit your horror to us via our email in the description. Now please relax and enjoy. Cheating Story 1. My wife and I met through online dating about a decade ago and hit it off pretty quickly. We have been married 8 years now. We own a house together and have 2 young, less than 6-year-old children. Neither of us had really had a successful long-term relationship prior to meeting each other. We are a team and we constantly have each other's backs. We have worked through some stuff in the past, mainly financial stuff we didn't see eye to eye on, but we communicate well and work through things as a team. We are a single unit. We have not had any insurmountable hurdles until seemingly now. She is straight, always maintains that she is straight, but she definitely has the sort of style that gives off "I like girls" vibes. My wife has issues with where to draw the line on joking about things, and in her workplace the level of joking, especially of a sexual nature, crosses all kinds of lines that wouldn't come near to being crossed at my workplace. I would get fired for the sort of stuff she and her co-workers joke about on a daily basis, but it comes with their work environment. Recently she has made a new friend at work, within the last couple of weeks, roughly the same age, who she could not stop talking about. Let's call her Rachel. Rachel is so funny. Rachel has a kid in our kids' class at school. Rachel sent me another funny message. She's so cool, haha. Rachel is roughly the same age as my wife and I to my knowledge, and is married to a wife, and they have at least 1 kid. Last night I was plugging in the iPad to charge, and the iPad is linked to my wife's phone, and so messages on her phone appear on the iPad as well. She was working a late shift, so I was home alone with the kids. I was plugging it in, and there was a message notification on the screen, a phone number with no name, and the message absolutely gushing about my wife's personality, looks, etc. Now normally, I don't dig into her messages. I see the jokes that come through sometimes, and you can tell they are jokes. But this one didn't sit well with me. It was too non-jokey, too legitimately heartfelt. And so I opened up the message. And what I gathered over the next 10 to 15 minutes is that this was Rachel texting her, and that something, not sure what, had happened earlier in the day between the two of them, physically, and that my wife and put up a boundary. But then all of the messages after that were the two of them flirting back and forth, and my wife asking what if they moved the boundary, and Rachel responding that they could discuss setting a new boundary. My wife also expressed that she wishes she had met Rachel before me, or at least before we had kids. I took pictures of all of the messages with my phone. I wasn't sure how to screenshot them and send them to myself from the iPad without her realizing. And then I started texting her and asking her how her day was, what did she get up to, etc. It is slowly revealed that she had spent the morning with Rachel. That Rachel was at our house in the morning, for the whole morning. That they had chatted about issues at work and issues with Rachel's marriage. And my wife never does this. She never has people over to the house like that. The odd time she does, I generally hear about it. She tells me because she is excited that she had an old friend over or something. And so I danced around it a bit with a few more text messages and then said screw it, I know something happened, and I'm going to put her on the spot. And I texted something along the lines of, I am about to start asking some very real questions, and you need to have a very good answer, and then indicated that I had charged up the iPad for her for when she got home. The iPad lights up with my message, and then I can see that she read it, and then it lights up again with a message to Rachel, with a screenshot of my message to my wife, and she says to Rachel, we're done. Rachel asks what is going on, and my wife says that I know because I can see the whole conversation on the iPad. And then she texts me back asking if she can call me in a few minutes when she can find a quiet spot at work. I told her not to call me, and made arrangements for her to sleep in the basement. I am numb right now. I did not sleep last night. I had a million thoughts floating through my head. This morning I sat with her in the early hours of the morning, and had a discussion that I think we need to address this through a marriage counselor who knows better how to attack this. I asked her why, and she has no answer. She says she can't explain it. She says there is nothing wrong with me, it is nothing I did. That she is happy in life, and doesn't know why she did it. She says all they did was kiss, and nothing more, but I told her that I know from her messages that she was pushing for more. I poured my heart out to her, and all I got back was some mumbled sorry, and, I know you're hurting, etc. She doesn't know what to say, and she seems numb as well. She said she is embarrassed. I told her that she is embarrassed and sorry only that she got caught, because she obviously wasn't thinking about me or the kids. I left this morning for work telling her that I am willing to patiently work through this with a marriage counselor, but that this was going to take some time. That this wasn't some Oh, it was a work party, and we were all drunk, and I made a mistake. This was a Thursday morning, stone cold sober. Invited her into the house immediately after dropping the kids off at school. Minutes after, a couple hours after we had just had morning sex. And then flirting with her via text the rest of the day while at work together, and further getting handsy at work. All the while texting me, "How was your day? Here's what's in the fridge for the kids for dinner. Can we find some time to FaceTime the kids tonight?" I can tell by the timestamps on the text messages that she was flirting with this Rachel right prior to, and right immediately after the call with the kids. I am so mad and trying to keep a level head and not do anything without rational thought put in first. I believe in trying to fix this. Does anyone have any advice, or pointers etc. on how to go about this? I have already made clear that I want to go through marriage counseling. I have told her that I want her to get an STD screening. I have told her that she needs to smarten up at work and stop kidding around and act like a professional, regardless of what others do. She has indicated that she has cut contact with Rachel and will not speak to her other than in a professional capacity when she has to at work. I have photos of the messages they sent to one another, and my wife does not know that I have them, only that I could see what was on the iPad. I have told her she can get comfy in the basement for a while. I don't know if there is anything else I can do right now. Is this a lost cause? Should I just go scorched earth? I don't want to do that to my kids. Should I get her checked for a tumor? I so badly want to believe she has some tumor that has tweaked her brain. This is just so out of left field. It came out of absolutely nowhere and is nothing like her. And she seems to have no real idea of why it happened, other than she got curious. Should I try and get in touch with Rachel's wife and let her know? Or see if my wife has the balls to do it? Or just leave that one well enough alone? She's got another late shift today, and I am at work now, so we probably won't cross paths again until tomorrow morning. We have a weekend of kids' birthday parties to attend, which I don't know how we'll get through without people realizing there is something terribly wrong between us. Any advice anyone has I would very much appreciate before I speak to her in person again. I want to make this better, and I don't want to feel like I screwed it up by trying the wrong way if it goes south. Cheating story 2. My wife and I have been together on and off ever since junior of high school. After going back and forth with dating, then being friends with benefits, dating, and finally getting married. During the time around 2012 to 2013, I started to suspect that she was cheating as I saw a bunch of signs, such as always facing her phone downwards, changing the password on her phone, and constantly going out to hang out with the girls. We also didn't have much sex BC. She was always tired or had a headache. She always went out with people I've met before, and we were in a rocky place in terms of our relationship at that time. I admit was not too happy with her at the time, but we stayed together. I had my suspicions, but I never thought she would actually cheat, because she was always the one chasing me whenever we were apart. She also always seemed super innocent. I can't remember which Christmas it was, but we were at her parents' house, and I remember she disappeared into the bathroom for quite some time. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but it always stuck in my mind. Later that night, after we went home, we had sex and was just laying down. She gets a text from some guy's email, and I believe it was a heart eyes emoji. I don't remember how I saw it exactly, but her phone was right there. I confronted her about right away, and she lied, and told me it was a different guy friend that I recently met, and he invited her to a party. I knew it was a lie, so I asked her to show me, and she had already deleted the text by hiding the phone from me. This happened right in front of me. At this point, obviously something was not right. She then admitted it was from a guy from college, and that they have been texting for a while, but it was nothing. She said she never slept with him, only hung out with him a few times, but never did anything according to her. I start to grill her more and more with questions, and she sticks to the story that they texted, hung out, but never did anything wrong. I remember a few months back she went out, and when she came out, I felt the urge to snoop through her phone as I felt something was wrong. I found a text she sent him saying, "I'm drunk now." She said she saw him at a bar and was just kidding around. This is my first time posting something like this, so forgive me if my story is all over the place. Anyways, we stay together after this incident, but this issue never left me. I would always confront her and ask her to tell me the truth, BC. There was no way they didn't have sex judging by the lengths she went to cover her tracks. Found out later that she had his name in her phone as Lucy, a close friend. She constantly tells me they never had sex or anything for years. We got married in 2019, and she still kept up the lie, and while I knew she was lying in my gut, For some reason, I just let it go. But not really. I went through some depression a year ago for other reasons and saw a therapist. I mentioned this issue, and the therapist gives me the motivation to rehash this again. I told her I need to heal, blah blah, and she ends up admitting that they actually did have sex, but just twice. This of course angers me, and now I can't get over the fact that I think she is still lying. I know she was messing with him for months, and there is no way she only had sex with him twice. It seems like every few weeks, the thought pops into my mind and I confront her, but she sticks with that same story. I feel like I am traumatized and am constantly thinking about this when I see anything that involves cheating in movies, shows, music, or even Reddit. I know she hasn't cheated ever since BC. We both work from home, pretty much spend 24/7 together. We have a 4-year-old child now. I know her phone passcode, but I never even snoop. I'm not 100% sure why I am writing this. I guess I want to know if I need to get over this and how. Is it not even a big deal since it was so long ago? I guess I am just looking for other thoughts to see if I am being crazy. Thanks for reading, and I would be happy to answer questions as I probably left out a lot of details. To summarize, my wife admitted to lying to me for 10 plus years and came clean about sleeping with the affair partner. Said they only had sex twice. I still do not believe her and think there is way more to the story and want to know more of the truth. Am I crazy to want to know more? Is the trust just completely broken, so no matter what the truth is, I won't believe her anyways? There are some that blame me for staying with her back then, and I get it. I feel ashamed about that sometimes as well, but sometimes it's just hard to see clearly when you're in the thick of it, I guess. To answer some questions/add context, my biggest issue with this is what some comments mentioned. I feel like my life was dictated by a lie, and it is so hard to get over that. Our relationship was not in the best place when the cheating happened. We were kind of drifting apart, but we still lived together, and I just never thought she would resort to cheating. She's always been a kind soul, and I thought she would have the decency to at least break up with me first. Her parents were pretty strict on her as a child, and I was her only first serious BF. She told me this was part of the reason for her cheating. If I knew about her lying about having sex with him back then, I would have left her. It really sucks for me to say, and I feel so weak for saying it, but honestly, I don't want a divorce, and I want to make it work. I know a lot of you are calling for divorce and would call me naive or dumb, but for the past 5-6 years, she has been a great wife/mother. She came clean last year. I was in therapy until last November, but stopped going because my therapist had to go out of network, and I just couldn't shell out $250 per session until my deductible hit. I could probably try finding another, but have been procrastinating. I should take all your advice and find one as soon as I can. Why I married her even though I had my doubts. I can't even explain it. I do love her and feel completely comfortable with her. I believe she is a good person deep down. I've always known she would be a great mother as well. I think my next step is to figure out how to deal with it, because I truly do not want to break up my family. My son loves his mom and loves when we are together. I love her too, as naive or dumb as that may seem. I feel like there is so much more context I could provide, but couples therapy might be where we need to be. Thank you all again for your thoughts and words. Cheating Story 3. Warning that this post is long and obviously trigger warning for infidelity below this point. In April, when I was 12 weeks pregnant, I found out that my husband had recently started cheating on me with a girl at his work, and I still haven't gotten over it. We've been married since summer of 2018, but together since summer of 2014. It's nearly our 9-year anniversary now, and I am currently 30 weeks pregnant with our first child. I always thought that if my partner ever cheated on me, I would be out the door in a hurry, because it's a type of disrespect I could never stand for. However, I never thought it would happen to me, let alone after I had put 8.5 years into this man. Plus a house, 2 cars, 2 dogs, a cat, and a baby we both wanted for many years at that point. I know I am more sensitive right now due to the pregnancy, but it's now August, and I am so tired of waking up hurting every day. After I found out, I confronted him, and he admitted that he had started sleeping with her, and at the time had done so 3 times. I was in my first trimester, and he knew how sick I had been, literally spending all day every day throwing up. My morning sickness lasted until around dinner time, usually, and sleeping. He has a job that has always kept him pretty busy, but he would always check in with me throughout the day. I work from home and am self-employed, making much less money than him, but was something we had discussed in depth after the loss of my first pregnancy, and agreed that me being home and dealing with the house and pets was something we should try. Plus, we both wanted me to be a som for whenever we did have a baby, so while I make less, it was something we fully agreed on together. When he would check in, it was always so sweet. He called me in between meetings, on the road driving any time he was free, and he would text me to announce his safe arrival every time he had to go anywhere. It was never a burden that I asked for him to check in, because we both just naturally wanted to talk to each other all during free moments in the day, which is how our relationship had been for the entire duration. There was no asking at all really, it's just how it was with us. I gave him another chance when I confronted him, because I was so blindsided. It didn't make sense to me, and now it still doesn't. But I was 12 weeks along with a baby I had been wishing for years. We struggled with conceiving after our loss years ago, and I had a vision in my head of our family that I couldn't let go of. We agreed that he would go into work and end it with her the next morning, which he didn't think would be an issue because it was just sex, and they had no feelings involved. Let it be known that this girl knew about me, and I had stopped in at his office many times for lunch visits with my husband, and he had photos of me on his computer/desk, so there were constant reminders that I was real for the both of them. He told me in later conversations that before the affair started, she would joke with him that I'm too hot for him, and she planned on stealing me away. She apparently is bi with a heavy lean towards women, and when my husband would talk about her before the affair, I was told she was a lesbian that he and all the guys at work, besides one, found highly unattractive. What happened when he ended it with her is I guess she took it all right, left, and then a few hours later came back and begged him to not leave her. He told me that she was crying and clinging to him, and there was something about abandonment issues that I truthfully did not care about, because I was his partner of almost 9 years and carrying his child. He told me he had ended it though. Next, he went to get tested. There was no crossover at all while this was going on, and he was clean. He showed me all test results, as this was an important stipulation, obviously. For the next month, I watched him leave every morning and broke down as soon as he left, sometimes begging before he went to work for him to call in sick and stay home with me. I was a wreck. We had a vacation planned for months before coming up in May, and I somehow thought it would be good for us to get away and just be the two of us. I was counting down the seconds till that trip, keeping everything I was going through just to myself and quickly deteriorating. In that month, I lost 22 pounds because I could not eat, and every time I did, I would throw up. My husband watched me in agony, a complete shell of who I once was, trying to grow our child and not being able to stomach food literally at all. It got so bad that my whole face broke out in what looked like hives from how hard my body was trying to throw up when there was nothing left inside me every day. Like little blood vessels popped all over my skin from sobbing and puking all day. We went on our trip, and it was painful. There was good times, but also I was still so broken and had no trust in him. This whole month-long period I felt something was still off, but he gave me access to his phone, and I would check it in front of him, and also whenever he was asleep or in the shower just to be sure. After the vacation, it got really bad for me. The intuition in my head that I felt back in April had never really went away, but it was so incredibly loud that I felt like I was going crazy. He was telling me he loved me, reassuring me that it was really over with her, that he was going to be a good husband to me and the best father to our daughter, and no matter how much I wanted to believe him, there was something in me telling me he was lying. While he showered one morning, I went into the bathroom to pee, and his phone was sitting on his pile of work clothes for when he got out. I grabbed it and brought it with me for while I peed, thinking it would be like every other time where I looked at his phone and found nothing. Instead, in his WhatsApp, there was a thread of messages with her from the night before. The day before was a long work day for him, something I dreaded even before the affair because being apart from him for crazy hours made me miss him, but knew there was no way to avoid. I remember I had offered to bring him food for lunch, even though we lived an hour away from the office, and he told me not to worry about driving, that he'll bribe one of the guys into bringing him something, so I didn't have to waste the gas money. In reality, she was bringing him lunch, and he was texting her about it at the same time he was texting me. Those texts haunt me so badly even now. She had told him, "I miss you," and he replied the same, so clearly they had only progressed more in the last month. When she was bringing him lunch, he told her, "I just want you and a burger." And then there was some hours later messages where they laughed about getting everyone out of the office inconspicuously, so they could be alone, and she said, "Now I get to have you." And reading those messages, 16 weeks pregnant and first thing in the morning, quite literally made me want to die. When confronted, He promised me that they didn't have sex even though it sounded like it would happen in those messages, but that he has still been sleeping with her. Just not that day, I guess. This was back in May. I left him the next day, after I confronted him again, and he admitted that he never actually stopped. He tried, and his story was half true, he says, that when he spoke with her, she came back crying and begging, and then apparently forced him into an empty office where she tried to go down on him. He promised me that he stopped her and shoved her away, but that she had gotten his pants down and gotten close enough to touch him before he got away from her. Nothing happened that day, he swore to me, but that in his mind it was over then, because in our initial conversation I told him I would give him a second chance, but if he did this again I would leave him. He counted this as doing it again, even though when he broke down and told me this, it sounded more like she assaulted him while he was saying no, rather than him cheating another time. But he didn't see it that way at the time, and thought I'd leave if he told me, and figured he might as well not stop, if I was just going to find out, and leave him in the long run because he had already messed up. Now fast forward to August. I've been living alone since May. I left him the day after I found out the second time, going to stay with my aunt for a few days with my dogs. I ended up coming back to the house and kicking him out, because it didn't seem fair to me that everyone besides him had to suffer. Me being pregnant and hauling around two 6-year-old dogs who are very used to being homebodies and were confused and stopped eating due to the stress. Plus our cat, who is deeply bonded to me and is used to me being home with her all day, was now left alone while he was working for 10+ hours, and all of our animals are friends, so it was really fucked up for everyone but my husband, who was the one who did the wrong thing anyways. So now I am 30 weeks pregnant, preparing to sell our house and move back into my dad's house, with the 3 animals and my daughter when she is born, and am still so hurt. I really felt like this man was the love of my life and my soulmate. All of our friends who I've spoken to about our separation, I cannot afford a lawyer until the house sells, and I'm unfortunately a sorry excuse of a woman and sob whenever I think of the word divorce, even though I know that has to be one of the steps I take down the line asterisk. Asterisk have been absolutely shocked due to how out of character this was of him. We were known as the couple that could handle anything together. My family was the same way, because of how wonderful my husband was to me for 8.5 years. He was so emotionally supportive and sweet, and I like to think I was to him as well. I lost my mom, who was my best friend, and we together lost our first baby, and he dealt with going no contact with his mother, and we were truly each other's rock for so long through all of those moments, just to name a few. And I'm carrying his daughter, who I love deeply already. I know he hurt me and changed me as a person, but it's so incredibly hard to forget the years of happiness I had with him and see that they're seemingly over now. The shitty thing is I would probably take him back if he came to me and said all the right things and made the right promises and made me believe him. But instead, I live alone while growing this baby and taking care of the animals we picked and have raised for 6 and 2 years together, dealing with this trauma by myself, and he is all but living with the girl he cheated on me with. Every time I drive past his apartment, her car is there. Sometimes when even his car is gone. He promises that she doesn't have a key, and that when the baby is born she won't get in the way of him being a father. She hates children/babies, cats and dogs, so clearly she's a super great person on top of knowingly fucking a married man. But at this point it's been months of him knowing he's hurting me. We're still publicly married. His family has no idea of any of this. Only our mutual friends and my family know any of what's happened, though not with all the details I've put in this post. I should mention that when I did come face to face with this girl, only once, she laughed at what she had done, and when I told her that she broke apart my family and took my daughter's father away before she was even born, she literally shrugged and muttered, "Yeah, I know," while looking so fucking smug about it. I only say this because I know people will say to not blame the affair partner, but only blame my husband, who was the one who broke his vows to me, but I fully blame them both. She knew what she was doing, and so did he, and she seems to like knowing how powerful she was in this situation. He tells me often that he doesn't want to end our relationship, but that right now he isn't right for me. That he cannot be who he was, because he fucked up so badly that he doesn't know how to fix it. Now he's going with monogamy just isn't for him. Even though he and his affair partner are living together recreating the life we had, living very obviously in monogamy currently. It hurts so much because he's already replaced me with her. Some 20-year-old girl is sleeping beside my husband and having meals with him, and sitting in his passenger seat. It just isn't how my life was supposed to go. I wish so much that I could stay firm on hating him, because trust me that I do. and I've had several hours over the last few months where I make sure he knows what he did to me and how much I hate him for ruining the woman I was before this betrayal. But I also love him still, and I want the family I was all but promised. We couldn't get pregnant for nearly 3 years, and the month I did get pregnant I literally told him, if it doesn't happen for us, it doesn't happen. I wanted to be a mom, but if it's not in the cards, I will come to terms with it, and I know I can be fulfilled in our relationship without a baby. And then I shockingly did get pregnant, and I felt like it was all falling into place finally. That we would be happy in us, like I pictured, but now with a little baby we both daydreamed about for years. I'm really unsure how Reddit works, and I know this post is so long so no one probably read it, and I don't really know why I wrote it here anyways. I know in this situation he is in the wrong, and I don't need anyone to point it out to me. And I also don't want anyone calling me names for still loving this man who has disrespected and mistreated me so immensely over the last 4 months. It's just coming up on our anniversary, and I am desperately lonely in this quiet house that I now have to pack up all by myself, and I wanted a place to put my feelings. If you comment, please be nice. I feel stupid and weak enough as it is. I've been with him since we were both barely 19, and moved straight from my childhood home into an apartment with him. I've not spent a single adult year alone, and I'm just really sad all the time and don't know what to do. I try to go no contact with him, but we're selling a house and I'm in my 3rd trimester with his baby. I just hate him and I hate myself. I want him to wake up and see what he's doing, but I don't think he ever will because he has to avoid the accountability of his actions. And it's not like I could ever trust him again anyways, but now I have to co-parent a child with him for the next several years, and I don't feel strong enough for any of the future anymore. I don't get how he could do this to me. Cheating story 4. My partner and I, mid-30s, have been together for 20 years, high school sweethearts. We've had a solid relationship, or so I thought. However, the past couple of years have been tough. My brother's terminal cancer, his father's sudden passing, caring for his grieving mother, renovations, and planning our wedding. I've been experiencing burnout and what I thought was sad, seasonal depression. So we took a 1.5-month trip through East Asia to reset and reconnect. The day before flying home, I used his phone to send photos to myself and found explicit pictures and videos not meant for me. When confronted, he denied everything. When I played one of the more explicit ones, he finally admitted to messaging someone online, claiming it was an online-only thing. After much denial, he eventually confessed they met up only a few times and had slept together only once, and it was weird. I felt bad the whole time. Says it's only been going on for the past few months, but I've since worked out it's most likely been closer to a year. He'd been absent the whole trip, glued to his phone. Often I'm telling him to look up. Evidently, he was sending her daily videos, including private moments from our trip, and when questioned about his phone use, he would say it was updates to keep Mum's mind at ease. He kept complaining that he should have stayed home, because his mum needs him. Now it's clear that was not the reason. Every place we went, he was taking pictures/videos to send to her under the guise of updating Mum. Every experience we shared, inside jokes, more intimate things like visiting Don Quixote's our 18th section together, it all became something to share it with her. He even bought her gifts suggesting they were for me. But when I saw the videos of the innuendos he's been sending her attached to the item, I realized they were never for me. The photos and videos showed we were having 2 entirely separate trips. The whole trip, his focus was her. He says she means nothing, and it's just a fling, but it's clearly more than that. I organized an entire trip that I didn't realize I was the third wheel on. Just so naive. On top of it all is the betrayal of my privacy. There's videos where he's sitting in a corner complaining about waiting for me while I take photos. And then there are also a bunch of really unflattering photos and videos of me where I'm in full slob mode on the couch and he's zooming in. I remember one time walking around the room in my underwear and seeing the camera on his phone discreetly tilt up. When I confronted him, he said he just wanted to have a photo of me. He denied sending those to her, but I don't see why else he would have taken them. I also walked in on them having phone sex without realizing. I thought he was just watching porn. He was talking but had his headphones on, and I thought he was just getting into it. I sidled up next to him, and he startled. I took his startle as embarrassment. That's how naive I was. I now realize he was so engrossed in watching her, he didn't see me enter. Did she see me enter the room? Did she see me sidle up next to him? Why is someone else in my private space? Leading up to this, he was increasingly distant, always on his phone, dismissive during conversations, and unwilling to help with household responsibilities or trip planning. He would ignore me when I'm talking to him, distracted by his phone. Sometimes when I'm mid-sentence, I would watch his eyes glaze over, and he would pick up the phone and start messaging. One time while we were discussing wedding plans, when I'd raise the issue with him, he would get snappy and yell at me for being too needy, and would pack on a tirade of all the things I'm doing wrong. We were fighting constantly. I keep a journal, so since then I've been able to match up the fights that were out of the blue, and of course they match up with the times when he would pack a bag and storm off to stay at his brother's place. While I'm left in tears wondering what I did wrong to deserve this outburst, he made constant excuses to leave the house. Need to play golf for my mental health. Need to check on Mum. Popping over to see the fam. And here I was exhausted from doing everything at home and resenting him, but trying to be understanding that they are a family grieving and thinking after years of being stationary with his depression, anything that helps his mental health is worthwhile. Then I saw the photos/videos and realized they were all excuses to go see her. I let myself be a doormat. A stupid, foolish doormat. I've been messaging him trying to get answers, a truthful explanation. I want to know who it is. We live in a small city. Everyone kind of knows everyone. As if the shame of being so naive and foolish is not enough. It's humiliating to think he's been driving her around in public while I've been oblivious to it all. But instead of taking accountability, he's gaslighting me and blaming me. Your priorities shifted and you abandoned me. Admittedly, our sex life was not great. We've been going through some stuff, including years of his depression and addictions where I became more like a caretaker. So your sex was very minimal. I accept I had a part to play in it. But I'm not exactly begging for it when he left me to handle all household responsibilities, renos, chores, mental loads, anything remotely adulting. He checked out of all of it. For example, I stripped and painted our entire exterior of our house this past summer by myself while he was golfing. The resentment runs deep. He rejected couples counseling and wouldn't go to therapy for his depression either. I carried the mental load of his depression, addictions, and our life together. I felt like I was doing everything while he checked out. I also realize now that I'm not sure I had sat at all, and was probably depressed because my partner had checked out of our relationship and was constantly gaslighting me. He was happy to make me miserable, just so he could have an excuse to go to her. I didn't fly home with him. I can't be near them knowing he's with her. I can see on the Ring cams he's packed a bag and been gone for days. I know I shouldn't look, but God, does it hurt? How could I mean so little to him? I am in Bangkok now and have spent the past week, a broken mess, sobbing in bed. I'm struggling to process 20 years together ending like this, as well as come to terms with the depths of the betrayal. Story 5. So to start off, around early mid-January, I have been talking to this girl to the point where she has met my family multiple times, and literally this past week we have talked about making it official. The entire time it seems like she has been honest about past lovers/etc. with me, but we both claim to be exclusive to one another, and I really appreciated how she operated like that, as I 100% do too. So everything overall has been fairly good. I mean, she has a bit of a short fuse, but I grew up around that my whole life, so I have more than enough patience for it, and unlike the people I grew up around, she is really good at getting space and coming back and apologizing just minutes later. I have now convinced myself she is cheating on me / breaking the exclusivity agreement, and am writing this like 30 minutes before work, but I can barely stand or think, and I feel like I'm going to vomit. A couple of days ago now, St. Patrick's Day, we had been under the impression that she would have been leaving for vacation with some friends, and I would be working. She had invited me, but I just got back from vacation not even 2 weeks prior, so I couldn't. So she ended up canceling just to save more money, and to actually be able to enjoy her St. Patty's Day, and I legit walked into work, and they asked if I wanted the day off, so OFC I said yes. I let her know, and she just asks me if I'm going to be staying home, or whatever, and not going out, so I replied something like, "Oh, I'm down for whatever, if anyone has plans I can join," or something like that, and she just kinda says, "Haha, okay." And I end up just kinda sitting at home for a couple of hours while she gets ready and goes to the bar. A friend from high school hits me up and asks me if I would go to a bar down the street from the other bar, and I agree, and I text her where I'm at, and if she wanted to come she's invited, if not I'll prob be at her bar in a few hours. Everything is normal, she replies like usual, and I have like a drink and 4 shots in the 3-ish hours in there, and let her know I'm headed to her bar. The line was an hour and 20 minutes, and usually she would have me snuck in because we know all the people who work there, but for some reason, assumed just she couldn't or something. She didn't and just would tell me, "Oh, I'm sorry, that sucks, sad face, how much longer?" But again, I was fine waiting in the cold. It sucked, but I caught up with my friend and joked with other people in the line. Right before I get in, she texts me, "Are you in yet?" And I don't see it cause him, just trying to rush in and find her, and I run to the side of the bar that everyone usually is, and I see her turned away with her friend and a small group of people. I get really happy and start to walk up to her when this guy our age grabs her arm and pulls her to the dance floor just feet away, and just I don't know, the way she accepts it and looked at him was just such a horrible feeling. I immediately sprint up and grab her arm and say, "Hey," and the dude snaps and looks at me, and her eyes shoot open, and she sprints away, and I try following her, but she runs to the restroom. I just use the restroom myself, and as I'm doing that I text her, deleting my messages over and over. I finally end with, "So is that why you wanted to know?" Referring to the "Are you in yet?" text. I go back out, and she is sitting down with her friend, who we will call Jane. I try to ignore it and have a conversation with her / ask her how her day is going, and she's just kinda drunk / high, and at a certain point I just politely ask like, "Hey, who was that guy by the way?" And she's like, "I don't know." And then I say, "You don't know the guy who grabbed you and brought you to the dance floor?" And she gets like annoyed and says, No, I don't know." So I just say okay and try to continue the night on a good note. After a while it starts to eat at me again, and I asked Jane who the guy was and explained what I saw and why it bugged me, and I just didn't want to be hurt or worry if it was for no reason. And she just kinda told me she had no idea what I was talking about, but hoped everything was okay. So that kinda helped me, and I just chose to try to believe her, even though she was there when my girl got grabbed. It's probably around 12 at this point, and I'm trying to defuse a fight that is about to happen with her other friend's BF and some random dude. It goes okay, and it seems to stop, and I calm him, and my girl asks me for water. So I go to the bar and get her some, and she chugs it, so I get her more, and as I'm coming back I see someone whisper in her ear and walk off. Same color hoodie as the previous dude, as that is about the only thing I took in, because I was so focused on her face earlier. So I walk up confused, and she just has this oblivious and expressionless look on her face looking back at me, and I give her the water, and she smiles and says thank you. After a couple min of sitting next to her, she pulls her phone out and opens Snapchat. I am not a nosy person, and she has assumed that Eve looked at her phone in the past while she was reading messages and got angry at me for it, but I thought she wanted to take a picture. So I kinda lean back and behind her and look at the screen / camera, and she instead swipes to the left, and I see a snap from someone named Jack, fake name. I do a little oop and look away, but my mind immediately thinks of the gray sweater kid. So I turn back out of curiosity, but she had quickly read and closed it, then turned off her phone. She leaves about 10 minutes later to take her friend Jane home and texts me when she gets there, and I, somehow still at this point, check her location to make sure she's safe and not driving anymore, and she is fine, and there, so I text her good night / etc., and she's very normal and loving about it. At the end of the night I ask her other best friend, we will call her Jill, I have a J thing going on, about it, and just say, look, I've been cheated on this exact way in the past, and am normally completely fine. I would just like to know more about the situation, and she just isn't telling me anything. And she hits me with basically the same thing Jane did, but with a, "I'm so sorry though, I would be worried too if I were in the exact same situation, so I get it, but I didn't see anything." And I just kinda sadly nod and let her know I'm going home and hug all my friends goodbye. The following day, yesterday, I just tried to ignore it even though I had terrible dreams and couldn't really get it out of my head. I was super nice and positive to her, and she was back, but it kinda seemed off, and I asked when she'd come over, and she said soon, but like implying not today soon. I again just continued and tried to keep it out of my head, but I couldn't, and the last conversation I had at the end of the day before I got out of work was, "Hey, I'll talk to you later." And she said, "Okay, bye." So by the time I get out I just had to talk to her and ask her about it for reassurance, so I could just address it and move on, because she seemed like she was super trustworthy, but just the situation seemed off. I get out of work and text her, "Hey," to no response. I clean off my car and let it heat up, and still no response. I check her location, and she's at this random house that is far away from all of her friends' houses and her place, so I'm just confused. It hits me and I'm like, oh no, I just need to get home. But on the way home I look at the street again, and I'm like, okay, I hate myself, but I need to stop by the house and just see like if any of our friends' cars are there, cause I doubt I'll get anything else out of it. I pull up and see her car covered in snow, meaning she's been there for a minute, and there's someone else's car who I don't recognize parked behind her, and the room light is on, but every other light is off. I park down the street a little and just try to breathe for a minute before I go home, and as I turn around and drive past again, the light is turned off, and I get back onto the main road and try to call her. No response. I legitimately have never gotten just denied a call like she let it ring the worst as she said no and texted me, "Hey, I'm busy," or something cause she's at her friend's. So I text her, "Is everything okay?" And she doesn't respond. At this point, I had literally worked myself up to the point where I needed to talk to her, and this is happening, so I just drive home and sit in my basement and try to just calm myself down and think about every possible way this couldn't be bad and how crazy I probably am. And I'm like, hey, maybe she was just tired and I didn't see a third car or something, and I already feel bad for even driving out there, so I should just drop it. So I check her location and she drove down the street for food, and then after a while back to the same house, and then my mind was like, okay, so she might have me muted. I know she's awake. Why did she turn the lights off if she was awake? Etc. And I just go to sleep and I can't, and I'm struggling so bad. So at 2 a.m. I send her basically everything I wanted to talk about and talked about her location, etc. and was just like, hey look, regardless of what answer you give me, I have complete trust. I just need answers, honesty, and reassurance. It has been 12 hours since, and she hasn't texted me, and I feel like I fucked up and ruined everything. But it also makes me think I just caught her, and it just sucks so bad because I wanted to help her cause she was in a shitty spot, and just I feel like I genuinely want to die. I now have to leave for work, but like, what should I do? Am I crazy? I don't know how I'm gonna get through today. I can barely stand, but it's too late to call in. Story 6. So I am in the army and I was married. I was approaching my first deployment to Iraq. It was very stressful, and it had my wife wanting me to find a way to stay and not deploy. Obvious things any wife would try to talk about. Anyways, so we have no kids, but both want them. So we talk about getting out of debt while I'm gone. She talks to her best friend back home, in another state where we are both from. Her friend agrees to let her move in and charge a modest $300 in rent so that we can get out of debt and start a family when I come back. A plan I was actually very pleased with. I deploy, she is there crying her eyes out saying she will miss me and loves me, and we will start a family when we get back. Fast forward 2 months. She starts acting distant, not wanting to talk much on our scheduled calls, or text back 1 or 2 word answers. We've been together 6 years. She is never at a loss for words. Anyway, one day she says, I need some space. She asked someone who is 10,000 miles away for space. I say why. She says she just needs space. She wants to find herself. So I remember back when we lived at home, she had a guy who was always being borderline inappropriate. I'm not a very jealous person, and I trust her. So I start seeing said guy on in basically all her pictures she posts with a group. Every time he is in the picture. Everyone else changes, but never him. So for the first time, I'm very jealous and uneasy about everything. So I clone her phone so I receive every text she receives as well as every text she sends. I'll never forget the first text I saw after cloning her phone. Hey babe, I'll see you after work. Want me to save you any of my leftovers? From her to him. It destroyed me. I lost 35 pounds in a week. I didn't eat or sleep. I stared at the phone watching every conversation. Watching them talk about trying to have a baby. It was literally everything a married person fears. I ask her if she is seeing someone, and she says no, she isn't. She is taking care of herself, and she loves me, blah blah. I don't say anything about receiving her texts for 2 months. Over this time, she finally admits cheating, and that he is so much better than me at sex, treating her right, and he does what she wants. During this time, she pays our debt off, gets tattoos with him, matching I love you tattoos, goes to shows with him, buying clothes, etc. with the money I'm making. So this is where revenge starts. I put a freeze on the account for a month. In that time, I change every password to every account to things she won't guess, army jargon slang terms. I block her on FB and my phone, so she has no way to contact me. She lost her car to repo a few months later, got kicked out of her place, had to sell her prized shoes and purses just to stay alive. I then find out she got a job at her old restaurant. So I post all the text conversations I have with her, and the guy talking about having babies that have time stamps on it, as well as post conversations we had with the matching time stamps, showing all of our friends what she has done. I then have friends call and complain at her job constantly on both he and her. They work at a restaurant, so I also have friends dine and dash. They both get fired. So she tries to call my command and tell them that I am abandoning her and she can't provide for herself. My commander knows what is going on. He does nothing because he had something similar happen. Then about a month before I come back, she calls me from another number to tell me she is pregnant with his kid. Mind you, I'm still gone, so we cannot get divorced yet. She moved away with him, 10 hours from me. April 24th, 2018. She calls me 5 months pregnant, crying uncontrollably, asking me where she should go. Apparently they have a giant blow-up fight. She tells him she is leaving. She says she doesn't know where to go, and I simply say, sorry, not my problem anymore. Fast forward January of this year. She calls me from a mutual friend's phone. Her, he hit me. Ick, what to do? Me. Maybe, you don't cheat on your husband when he is deployed for some guy who talks a big game. Her, well, I guess you are happy about this? Me. No, but I'm glad I know I'm not the bad guy in this story. And then the next month. Her, he is cheating on me with 2 girls. I'm sorry. I regret everything I did. I fucked it all up. Me. Yeah, you did. All in all, this woman destroyed my life. Put me into a deep depression I'm still dealing with. But I do feel a little better having proof that I wasn't the problem. To think if this happened even 10 or 5 years ago, I would have come back to an empty bank account, an empty house, as well as seeing my then wife pregnant with another man's baby. She actually hit me up yesterday to ask for some money to help cover rent. Edit. Answer a few questions. I realized I left out that we got divorced before the kid was born, so I have no financial responsibility to her, haven't now for almost a year. I mainly use T-Mobile's digit service to clone the phone. Google it, I don't feel like typing it. Also, no, I wasn't celebrating that she was physically abused. I did tell her to call the cops, but that's all I did. It's not right to abuse someone, but I also have no responsibility to watch out for her well-being. Story 7. A couple weeks ago, I decided I wanted to surprise my wife with a kid-free night out. My parents live about an hour and a half away from us, and I arranged for the kids to stay with them for the weekend. Usually, when I go to my parents', I am gone until later in the evening. We spend all day there and leave around dinner time. This time, I was dropping the kids off and immediately going home, so I could surprise my wife, and we could go out as soon as possible. I had made reservations at a nice restaurant, and was hoping to go to a few places for some drinks first. I left at 8:30 and was back in our housing plan before 12:30. As I pulled onto my street, I saw a truck parked in front of my house. I did not recognize it. I assumed it was someone seeing the neighbors, though, because it's not that unusual for someone to park in front of our house. I parked a few houses away thinking I would sneak into the house and surprise my wife instead of pulling in the driveway and going in the garage. I went in through a basement door. I was as quiet as possible, but as soon as I walked in, I heard her making sounds from the floor above. When I first heard it, I thought she was just by herself, maybe having some personal time. I didn't want to interrupt her privacy and embarrass her, so I was going to go back to my car and just go in the garage so she would know I was home. Then I heard a man's voice. I immediately felt sick. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. It is hard to describe how I felt in this moment. I decided to go upstairs. I had no desire to confront them. I just wanted to see what was going on. I moved slowly and quietly and went up the stairs. The door was halfway open. The kitchen was empty, but I could tell they were in the living room. It was obvious what was going on at this point by the sounds. There was no way for me to look in the living room without them seeing me. I pulled out my phone and opened my camera app. I put my phone just around the corner of a wall. This part is so hard to write. I could see my wife with a man I didn't recognize. I won't go into detail on what they were doing, but I think you can figure it out. I started recording it. I was thinking that I needed a record of it for whatever I decided to do in the future. I just stood there in my kitchen, watching this all unfold on my phone screen. I felt like I could just scream at any moment, but for some reason, I just froze completely. This went on for several minutes. She finally jumped off of him and made a comment about going to the bedroom, and they went upstairs. She even made a comment about how much time they had left. I walked into the living room and found the guy's pants. I took his wallet out and took pictures of his driver's license. I know his name and his address now. I've never met him. I have no idea how my wife knows him. I left the house the same way I entered. I went back to my car and cried like the pathetic man I am. I decided to watch the video to make sure it recorded. I watched it all. I'll spare the details, but I sat in my car for at least half an hour. I couldn't drive to my parents and get the kids as I would have to explain why. I decided that I would pull in the driveway, open the garage, and just pretend like I was there to surprise her. I took my time getting into the house. I made a lot of noise. When I saw her, she was very flustered, asking me why I was home, etc. She was in a robe and said she was just getting ready for a bath. I told her about my plans, and she seemed excited. She poured us both a glass of wine and said we should pre-game before getting ready. I don't think I talked much, really. She took me into the living room. I'm not proud of what I let happen. I could faintly see the guy sneaking downstairs and going to the basement stairs, but I didn't say or do anything. I just let my wife continue doing what she was doing to me. Since that day, I have watched the video of her repeatedly. I can't bring myself to make any decisions on what I should do next. She seems to know something is wrong with me because she's asked a few times if I'm okay. I feel worthless, and every time I hit a low point I watch that video again. I feel like I've watched it at least 10 times a day since I caught them. Story 9. My wife was my best friend. The majority of the last 14 years has been wonderful. I loved her more than anything, and she loved me too. She is a great person, with a bit of a temper, but she was the yin to my yang. I am a very even-tempered person, and I try my hardest to stop and think before I act, while she is a bit more carefree and emotional. But it was a good mix. She was the other part of me that I was missing, and I to her. We had been a happy child-free couple for many years. She had always told me that she did not want children. I had a daughter many years before we met, and she helped take care of her when she visited. She was a great second mother to her. Like any couple, we had our ups and downs. There was some issues with her getting too close to a coworker years ago. She lied about the problem initially, but eventually we worked past it, and I thought we were stronger than ever. We went out together a lot. We drank a little more than we should have for our health, but I didn't see it as a drinking problem for either of us. We both worked in hospitality, and it kind of goes with the industry. Then she changed her mind about having a baby. Maybe it was that she turned 30 and baby fever kicked in, or maybe it was seeing her sisters so happy with little ones that changed her mind. It doesn't really matter. But we had the conversation one night, and I told her that I would love to start a family with her. However, the timing was bad. The short version is that both of our jobs were possibly about to end, and we didn't know exactly what was going to happen in our near future. We eventually got back on our feet, after what turned into a devastating year for us where we lost everything and had to start over. During the bad times, she started drinking more and more. She has a family history of alcoholism. Things got pretty bad for a while with her behavior, because of drinking and depression from us having to start all over. But, as I said, we pulled out of it, we got back on our feet, and started putting our lives back together. However, her drinking continued to be a problem. She would get drunk and mean and call me names. She got drunk at work, and was fired for drinking on the clock. She was still my wife, and I still loved her, so I tried to support her and help her. She would quit drinking heavily for a while, and then a few months later go right back to it. She was always sorry when she was sober, and most times were still good, but once a month or so she would get wasted and tell me she hates me, and that she is leaving me for a real man that will have a family with her. I tried to tell her that we can't have a family while you're drinking and acting this way. A few months ago, things started to really go downhill. She started drinking every day, including hiding alcohol and lying to me about her drinking. She also started doing cocaine on an almost daily basis. I don't judge drug use. We had done it together plenty of times in the past, but not often. She was lying to me about her drug usage. I confronted her several times. I reminded her that she told me she wanted to start a family, but was not acting in a way that could ever have that happen. Then it happened. She was hanging out with a guy that I thought was a friend, but it turns out he was not. She was drunk. They were doing coke together. He and I had previously had a few discussions about our problems, and he used that information to say all the things she wanted to hear. He manipulated her into getting laid. Yes, she still did it, and it was still her decision. She was not our ****D. But he did prey on a drunk wowin, gave her cocaine, and when he got laid, kicked her out of the house. I had to pick her up that night. She gave me a story about them going to get more coke from his house, and he started throwing up, and then she just wanted to get out of there. If she would have became to me immediately after that happened and confessed, and was willing to change, I think I could forgive her on the spot, get her help, and try to move on. However, that didn't happen. I found the text messages they sent each other about a week later. I confronted her. She told me what happened, and she agreed to leave and go back to her parents' house. That where she is currently. When I found the messages, I didn't know that she was as fucked up as she was that night. I also didn't know how much he had manipulated her to get laid. I have since found out that he has done this before, and this is his MO for getting laid. He is a horrible person that waits and preys on girls that are vulnerable. That is just gross. She is incredibly sorry. She knows that what she did was wrong, and she admits that what happened that night was her fault, even if he said all the right things. She wants to try to work this out and try to save our marriage. She has already quit drinking and says she will never drink again. She says that she was angry that we didn't have a family, but knows that the reason we didn't was because of her. She has said that this was the rock bottom she needed to hit to fix herself and to be the person she used to be. I don't know how to move forward. She was my best friend. She was the love of my life. I know that without the drugs and alcohol, none of this would have ever happened. But how do I ever trust her again? And even if I can eventually trust her again, the basic problem that we had was starting a family, and I don't think I can trust her enough in the time we have left to start one. Her biological clock is ticking. I want nothing more than to have back what we had before our lives were destroyed, but nothing can turn back time. Nothing can undo what has happened. I realize that I wasn't perfect either, no one is. But am I just prolonging more hurt in the future? What do I do? Story 9. My wife was my best friend. The majority of the last 14 years has been wonderful. I loved her more than anything, and she loved me too. She is a great person, with a bit of a temper, but she was the yin to my yang. I am a very even-tempered person, and I try my hardest to stop and think before I act, while she is a bit more carefree and emotional. But it was a good mix. She was the other part of me that I was missing, and I to her. We had been a happy child-free couple for many years. She had always told me that she did not want children. I had a daughter many years before we met, and she helped take care of her when she visited. She was a great second mother to her. Like any couple, we had our ups and downs. There was some issues with her getting too close to a coworker years ago. She lied about the problem initially, but eventually we worked past it, and I thought we were stronger than ever. We went out together a lot. We drank a little more than we should have for our health, but I didn't see it as a drinking problem for either of us. We both worked in hospitality, and it kind of goes with the industry. Then she changed her mind about having a baby. Maybe it was that she turned 30 and baby fever kicked in, or maybe it was seeing her sisters so happy with little ones that changed her mind. It doesn't really matter. But we had the conversation one night, and I told her that I would love to start a family with her. However, the timing was bad. The short version is that both of our jobs were possibly about to end, and we didn't know exactly what was going to happen in our near future. We eventually got back on our feet, after what turned into a devastating year for us where we lost everything and had to start over. During the bad times, she started drinking more and more. She has a family history of alcoholism. Things got pretty bad for a while with her behavior, because of drinking and depression from us having to start all over. But, as I said, we pulled out of it, we got back on our feet, and started putting our lives back together. However, her drinking continued to be a problem. She would get drunk and mean and call me names. She got drunk at work, and was fired for drinking on the clock. She was still my wife, and I still loved her, so I tried to support her and help her. She would quit drinking heavily for a while, and then a few months later go right back to it. She was always sorry when she was sober, and most times were still good, but once a month or so she would get wasted and tell me she hates me, and that she is leaving me for a real man that will have a family with her. I tried to tell her that we can't have a family while you're drinking and acting this way. A few months ago, things started to really go downhill. She started drinking every day, including hiding alcohol and lying to me about her drinking. She also started doing cocaine on an almost daily basis. I don't judge drug use. We had done it together plenty of times in the past, but not often. She was lying to me about her drug usage. I confronted her several times. I reminded her that she told me she wanted to start a family, but was not acting in a way that could ever have that happen. Then it happened. She was hanging out with a guy that I thought was a friend, but it turns out he was not. She was drunk. They were doing coke together. He and I had previously had a few discussions about our problems, and he used that information to say all the things she wanted to hear. He manipulated her into getting laid. Yes, she still did it, and it was still her decision. She was not our ****D. But he did prey on a drunk wowan, gave her cocaine, and when he got laid, kicked her out of the house. I had to pick her up that night. She gave me a story about them going to get more coke from his house, and he started throwing up, and then she just wanted to get out of there. If she would have became to me immediately after that happened and confessed, and was willing to change, I think I could forgive her on the spot, get her help, and try to move on. However, that didn't happen. I found the text messages they sent each other about a week later. I confronted her, she told me what happened, and she agreed to leave and go back to her parents' house. That where she is currently. When I found the messages, I didn't know that she was as fucked up as she was that night. I also didn't know how much he had manipulated her to get laid. I have since found out that he has done this before, and this is his MO for getting laid. He is a horrible person that waits and preys on girls that are vulnerable. That is just gross. She is incredibly sorry. She knows that what she did was wrong, and she admits that what happened that night was her fault, even if he said all the right things. She wants to try to work this out and try to save our marriage. She has already quit drinking and says she will never drink again. She says that she was angry that we didn't have a family, but knows that the reason we didn't was because of her. She has said that this was the rock bottom she needed to hit to fix herself and to be the person she used to be. I don't know how to move forward. She was my best friend. She was the love of my life. I know that without the drugs and alcohol, none of this would have ever happened. But how do I ever trust her again? And even if I can eventually trust her again, the basic problem that we had was starting a family, and I don't think I can trust her enough in the time we have left to start one. Her biological clock is ticking. I want nothing more than to have back what we had before our lives were destroyed, but nothing can turn back time. Nothing can undo what has happened. I realize that I wasn't perfect either, no one is. But am I just prolonging more hurt in the future? What do I do? Story 10. This happened years ago when I was around 18 and dating a girl I had gone to high school with. We had been together for about a year, and towards the last month of our relationship things started to die out. We wouldn't talk as much, and she never had time for me. She claimed she was always working at her family's grocery store. Her family had their own business for years. It was a small grocery store that at one point, while I was in between jobs, I even worked at for a short time. Her family were lovely, and me and her father got along great, and still chat every now and then because I was always working or studying, didn't party, and had set goals for myself early in life which her father thought was awesome. So anyway, back to our relationship. Because we both worked, we only had the weekends free, so usually we would do our best to spend time with each other. But she had grown distant, and I hadn't thought anything of it. But one weekend I receive a call from a friend of mine who tells me she had seen my girlfriend out with another guy. I didn't want to believe it. I was devastated. But I thought before I throw any accusations, I would get my own proof first. It took me almost 3 weeks to convince her to spend time with me. When she agreed and came over for a night after work, I had planned on confronting her to find out for myself. She arrived shortly after dark and told me she was going to have a shower. She went into the bathroom, but had left her phone with her bag and keys on the table. So I did what anyone who has been told they were being cheated on would do. I went through to see for myself. And what do you know, she was cheating on me with her ex-boyfriend, who was a dirtbag. You see, he was one of the kids at school that messed around, never came to school, was out smoking and drinking instead. I never really interacted with him outside of being asked for a lighter for a cigarette, but he was also selling drugs at school. I've always thought people who sell drugs to kids are dirtbags. Not cool at all, bro. I found out she had been going to see him on the weekends to do drugs and drink, as well as sleeping with him. There were messages talking about how I was too nice or focused on work too much. How she's only with me because her family loves me, and I can handle that if you tell me that. Not cheat on me because of it, I would rather leave a relationship freely. This hit me really hard and messed with my perception of women afterwards. I had never been cheated on before and didn't know how to handle the feeling. But I wasn't going to let her do me like that. Here comes the sweet revenge. You see, in those messages, they had been talking about needing money for alcohol or drugs and not having enough. This conversation led to him convincing her to steal it from her family business. She had been getting away with almost $800 or so every weekend, as well as stealing items from their shop. So I thought fast, screenshot all the messages, and sent them to her father from her phone. I told him it was me, and that this is what I had found in his daughter's phone. Shortly after she had finished up in the shower, I told her we were finished, and I knew everything. I told her to leave, and I had a surprise for her when she got home, to which she was confused about. She left after that, and I received a call from her dad, who was apologized to me for his daughter's actions, and sounded almost as devastated as I was. He told me he had already called the police, and they were waiting for her to get back home, as well as collecting her ex-boyfriend as an accomplice. I was shocked but thankful that I had cut dead weight from my life in a just fashion considering she cheated on me. She got to spend the night in a cell with her ex and was ordered to pay back the amount by a judge and given community service. He on the other had happened to have previous warrants out, and I don't know what happened to him after. I wiped my hands clean of her and moved forward. But man, that felt so much better that she at least got some punishment as a result. Story 11. My wife Rachel and I grew up in a largish town of close to 30,000 people. We knew each other at an early age, roughly 6 or 7, can't specifically remember. We were practically inseparable. At 16, we started dating each other. When we turned 18, we moved away for work in a city just a few hours' drive away. By 20, we were married and had bought our first house. At 22, we discovered that she was pregnant with a boy. It was then disaster struck. About 5 weeks before she was due to go on maternity leave, a large shelving unit collapsed and crushed her. I was told that both her and our child were killed instantly. 2 of her colleagues had also been injured in the accident, one left paralyzed, the other losing his leg after it had to be amputated. The company she was working for had, in a cost-cutting measure, decided to continue using old shelving that had been written off as unsafe instead of replacing it. I still haven't quite forgiven those executives and management personnel that made that decision, because they cut short the love of my life as well as killing our unborn child. It wasn't long after I was told I had a choice on how to proceed with what our company called compensation, but I called it blood money. They wanted to settle out of court to avoid a lawsuit. I, on the other hand, was out for their blood. Just to clarify here, this is not the revenge, this is still backstory. Fortunately, due to the coverage that it got, and involving several politicians, the case was settled quickly in court, roughly 3 years, in which the payout for all parties was close to 10 times the amount that they had initially offered. A lot of fines were given to them for breaches on work, health and safety. Executives were sacked, others were jailed, etc. A story for another time maybe, when I feel comfortable sharing. In this time, I was still working my job in telecommunications. My mother, bless her soul, had moved in while all this was happening to help me. I think I would have fallen apart if she hadn't been as involved as she was. It was around this time I was offered a promotion, but it involved a lot of travel around the state. I made a request to have an office in my hometown's branch, as I wanted to not only take care of businesses in the state, but in my hometown also, as there was no business representative located there, to which they agreed. After a few months, we settled into a routine of 1 to 2 weeks in the city office, 1 week in my hometown, and 1 to 2 weeks visiting the rest of the state. After a year, I decided to buy a house in my hometown, so I wasn't having to stay at my parents' place every week, or so that I was home and that I could come and go as I pleased. This is important for later in the story. It is about 4 years later that our story begins. Sorry if the backstory was a bit long. I had just returned from one of my trips on Friday and was checking in some stuff at my office when Harry, the branch's managing director, walked in. We had grown up together also, but had gone to different schools, but since coming back had developed a very close friendship. He asked how things were, and then asked me if I wanted to come to a house party that he was having that evening. Short notice and all, but I said yes. I felt like a few drinks with friends were in order. It was there that Harry introduced me to Catherine. She was a new hire at the branch where my hometown's office was located, and was getting to know everyone being new in town. We hit it off immediately. As much of a cliché as it sounds, it was almost as if Rachel was in front of me instead of Catherine. I won't bore you too much with the details, but after 2 years of dating, we decided to take the next step, and she moved into my hometown's house. Everything up to this point had been going really well. Catherine and my parents got along, and Rachel's parents also approved, and were happy that someone could make me just as happy as Rachel had done. All was going well for close to a year when things began to change. Skype sessions were cut short suddenly. Neighbors would tell me about how a car, described to me like it was Harry's, was always seen parked in the back alley near my house whenever I was away. Some clothes that weren't mine were in my wardrobe. All signs pointed to her cheating, but she said that nothing was happening. She said that Harry would come over occasionally to discuss business, etc., but never stayed the night. I chalked it up to me being paranoid and continued on as if nothing was wrong, but there was always this feeling that something wasn't right. It was close to 6 months after that I discovered that she had been lying to me. I had just finished closing a rather large contract with a new company, and negotiations had wrapped up earlier than I had anticipated. So instead of sticking around for the next few days, I decided to pay for an early flight home and surprise everyone. Fast forward a few hours, and I drive into my hometown and down the alley behind my house so that I could get into the house without being seen and surprise Catherine. Some part of me was curious, however, as to whether this mystery car was there. Sure enough, there was a car that was blocking the back entrance gate. I was confused for a moment, wondering if it had just been a neglectful neighbor parking, only to realize that it was indeed Harry's car. If it hadn't been for the high hedge line that I had put in a few years back for privacy, I may have well driven past my own place. Pulling up behind his car, I got out and thought it was strange that he was there so late, as she claimed that he always had left by now. As I approached the back of the house, I saw something that stomach dropped. In my kitchen, Catherine and Harry were going at it hammer and tong. I froze. Time stopped. There was my close friend, having sex on my kitchen bench with my girlfriend. I didn't know what to do. So many questions were running through my head. Was this real or was I dreaming? Why were they having sex in my house? Feeling defeated, I turned and left without them seeing me. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity. I was crying. Hard. But the sadness quickly turned into anger. The same kind of anger I felt towards those that were responsible for Rachel's death. I wanted to hurt them. Badly. As a pacifist, I don't believe in violence. It was then I knew I was going to punish them and destroy their lives. And what better time to start than now? I moved my car back up the alley, far enough away from my driveway that I could still see Harry's car, and then walked back to the gate where I could see into the house and called her phone. They were still going for it when it rang. They both looked at the caller ID and did a double take when my name came up. I could see that she was considering answering it, and they let it ring out. After a few moments they were back into it again, and I dialed once again. This time she did answer. As she was answering, I hung up and made my way back to my car. As soon as I did, she called me back. She asked why I was calling as late as I was, and I told her that I was about 10 minutes from home and didn't want to scare her coming in. She, obviously, was shocked and acted happy that I was coming, and the call ended very quickly after she said she was going to get up and get changed into something. I said bye and hung up. A few moments later, Harry came peeling through the gate and still half naked, jumped into his car, took off like a bat out of hell. I smiled a little, knowing the fear that both of them would be feeling from being so close to being caught. I waited a few moments before turning my car into the same place Harry had been moments earlier. The night was fairly uneventful afterwards, and it wasn't until after she was asleep that I got up and went to my office down the hall. I couldn't sleep. I needed to plan, and plan I did. The revenge. My mother always taught me to be a pacifist and to allow cosmic karma to take its course. But on this occasion, I decided that karma could use a helping hand. I decided to punish them separately, but destroy both of them. I knew that Harry had a drug habit. Nothing major, but he kept it very private. I only knew about it accidentally after seeing some coke, and we'd left out in his place, but pretended I hadn't seen it when he had made attempts to cover it up. I began calling some of my more unsavory clientele, and made a few discreet inquiries into obtaining some samples that they were willing to part with. A few days later, I had a decent enough stash for my plan to work. About a month later, I had friends, including Harry, around for a barbecue night. After making sure that I sufficiently liquored up Harry, I told him to stay the night and sleep it off. In the early hours of that morning, I took the drugs and an assortment of my personal belongings and placed them at various places around his car, with the biggest stash in his tire well. Confident that he wouldn't find them over the few months as the rest of my plan took effect, I locked the car up and went inside to sleep. I also placed some more drugs and personal items in his house after driving him home, because he was still too drunk to drive. A few days later, I staged a break-in by smashing the back pane of my back door into my kitchen and leaving it open before heading back to the city for a flight. I had several messages the moment I landed. One from my clearly panicked mom, who had found the back door smashed open and had called the police, one from Catherine in tears, and one from the local police asking me to call. After returning all the calls, I informed the police I was away on business and that I would be back the following week to talk with them. While away, I got Catherine to stay with my parents until after I got back and asked my dad to organize one of the local security companies to install cameras and an alarm system after getting the go-ahead from the police as to not ruin the scene of the crime. After getting home, I did the usual "my God, I can't believe this has happened, and why would anyone do this" routine. After doing a thorough check of everywhere, finding that the items I had taken were missing, and filing a police report. I had the security company's rep talk Catherine and I through how the cameras and alarm system worked. Then came the question I had been waiting for. The question of what happens if we are doing some business and don't want it recorded. She acted a bit shy asking this question, but I knew exactly the reason she was asking. He assured us that this was a question he got asked a lot, and we were shown on the home computer if we wanted to be doing things without it being recorded, how to stop the recording for certain cameras, so that we could protect her modesty. As I was walking him out, I asked him if cameras were turned off, could a notification be sent out, just as a security precaution. He came back in and helped me through how to set up email notifications and left shortly after. Fantastic. All I had to do was wait. At this stage, I approached legal advice for some help in relation to couples law in my country. I needed to make sure that my upcoming plan could legally be done, and that I would not be forced to pay out any money or equity to Catherine, as I didn't know if we were classified as a de facto couple or not. Being the sole benefactor of Rachel's estate, I didn't want to be left with any nasty surprises where Catherine could take any of the estate away from me. Shout out to those guys and gals there as they helped me get in contact with a great lawyer who assured me, due to the fact that although we had been dating for close to 4 years, we had not been living together long enough to be classified as de facto, and because I was paying all the utilities on the property that she was living in and didn't pay rent, showed that she had no legal standing to make a financial claim against me. Just to be sure though, he drew up what I felt was a pretty ironclad document just in case there was any legal trouble. The following week, my work had approached me and offered me a promotion to move back to the city and run the team that I was a part of, meaning I wouldn't need to travel as often and be in the one location, and due to the success of being located in my hometown, that they were considering having 3 to 5 representatives spend 1 to 2 weeks in the larger surrounding towns, including my hometown, as a part of my team. I said yes, and began the process of beginning my transfer, which would take about 6 weeks. Perfect. More than enough time to gather all my evidence. Upon getting back to my hometown the following week, I began to start in motion the rest of my plan. I asked Harry to approve 1 week's worth of vacation for Catherine for 2 weeks' time. I wanted to send her and a friend or two away on a retreat before I made the biggest decision of my life for a second time. He jumped up and gave me a huge hug, congratulating me on being prepared to take the leap again. I hugged him back tight, but not the way I think he imagined it at the time. He agreed and blocked out the week for me. I asked him not to say anything to anyone, as I wanted to make it as big a surprise as I could. I knew that it would spread like wildfire around the office regardless, but that was my plan. That night, I told Catherine that I had booked her and 2 friends to go to a tropical spa resort, all expenses paid for a week. No questions asked, pick 2 friends, and come back to the biggest surprise of her life. She screamed like a kid who had just been told that all the candy in the shop was hers to have. I then told her that the following week, I was going to spend it in the city, preparing for a large client who was one of my biggest accounts, and needed some people in my team to help before flying out the following week, and I wouldn't be home until the Monday that she was leaving, so I wouldn't be able to see her, which seemed to disappoint her, but I told her it would be worth it when she returned. What I failed to tell her was that I had decided to take 2 weeks vacation on the other side of the country, mentally preparing myself for the shit storm that was about to erupt the moment she stepped foot on the plane, as well as enjoying my first stage of freedom. On Sunday 2 weeks later, I flew back and began driving home. Once getting there, I'd done a quick pass by my house, and sure enough, Harry's car was there. Like the first night I had caught them, I parked a little ways back and checked the cameras. Asleep in my bed. No surprise, honestly, as I had recorded them constantly do this over the 2 weeks I had been away. I then made my first call to the police blocking my caller ID. I told them that I was one of my neighbors and saw someone hanging around in their car in the alley behind my house, and occasionally passing something through windows to passing cars, while also looking into my yard, and I was concerned that they were dealing drugs and are going to break into someone's property. I gave them his license plate and description. They said they would have someone there in a few minutes, so I thanked them and hung up. I then called Catherine and told her I was about 10 minutes from home, and that I knew she was flying out tomorrow, but desperately wanted to surprise her. Looking back at the footage now, I laugh at the commotion that I am surprised I didn't hear. In a few short seconds, Harry was half-dressed and flying out the back door to his car. At that point, I couldn't have asked for a more perfect scene. As Harry was peeling away, One of the police cars rounded the corner behind me, saw Harry driving away fast, and gave chase. After pulling in, greeting an excited Catherine, and doing all the couple things, she fell asleep again. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep a wink. The next day, her and her friends were bundled into a car. After they drove away, I had to wait a few hours, but I began to execute my plan. I called my friend, who was a removalist, and apologized for the late notice, but needed my place packed, and moved on Friday. After agreeing on a time, I told him that he would need to take certain boxes to a storage facility, which he said wasn't an issue. Then I began packing Catherine's belongings. Later that day, I got a call from the police for me to come and identify some property that they had apprehended from a suspect the previous night that fit the description of property I had reported stolen. I grinned to myself, happy that my plan for Harry had grown to fruition, and replied that I would be there shortly to collect it. Of course, when I got there, some of the items were still unaccounted for, due to the fact that they must have still been in his house, and they hadn't searched there yet. By this stage, the town was buzzing with news. Events in my hometown don't stay secret for long. Harry was disgraced and promptly fired for his possession of drugs and stolen property, and our respective bosses, on behalf of the company, had extended a formal apology towards me during the week. That night I went to my parents' house and told both mine and Rachel's parents what had happened, omitting certain details, and that I was moving back to the city after being promoted, but Catherine wouldn't be a part of it. They were pretty upset initially that I hadn't let them know what was going on, but were happy that I was handling everything maturely and hadn't sunk to their level. Thought they didn't agree with ghosting Catherine. But after some drinks, laughs, and tears, I went home. On Friday afternoon, after a busy week of organizing cleaners for the following week, the real estate to put my house on the rental market, and various other tasks at my hometown's office, I packed some things into my car and drove to my parents' place and said goodbye before the drive. Before leaving, I went to Becky's house. Becky had been one of Rachel's closest friends growing up. She was the only other person who knew what was happening, minus the details about Harry. Without her help, I wouldn't have been able to organize everything as quickly as I had. I gave Becky a large manila folder with my gathered evidence of her cheating, as well as the letter and a few other legal documents from my attorney stating that she was ordered not to contact me, and the details of how to access her belongings located at the storage unit I had rented out. After a quick goodbye, I left and drove back to the city. On Sunday, I woke up to several missed calls, voice messages, and text messages. Turns out, Catherine had come home early after being alerted to something being afoot in town, only to find an empty house and a for rent sign out the front. Freaking out, she had gone to my parents, who closed the door on her the moment that they answered, forcing her to call everyone until she managed to somehow be contacted by Becky and told that she had a package for her. I was told that she didn't take too well to that, as I fully well knew at that point from the numerous angry texts and voice messages from her accusing me of setting up Harry, of being deceitful, etc. I was worried that she might show up at my front door, but nothing ever happened. 5 weeks later, after leaving and been promoted, I write this out for you, dear reader. Granted, it's long, and it took a few rewrites to shorten it down from my initial 14 pages, double what this story is now. But I feel that most of what I said was important enough for the story. To sum up, after my pregnant wife was killed in a workplace accident, I moved back to my hometown and connected with a woman who, after moving in with me, cheated on me with a close friend. I set him up to take the fall for drug possession, and after sending her away on a spa retreat, rented out my house and left town for a promotion while exposing her as a cheater.